Hi, you. It's me, Nicole Phoenix Star, and this is the Next Top podcast. So today's podcast is about redirecting energy and specifically around the anxiety energy that sometimes people get. And how this came about is I've been having conversations about this with my son, Leonanda, because he has a new friend who experiences anxiety. And he was telling Leo about it. And Leo said to me, "What's anxiety?" And I said, "Don't you know what it is?" And he goes, "Not really." I said, "If you could guess from the conversations you've had with your friend, what would it be?" And he goes, "That you don't know how to go with the flow." I said, "Well, that's kind of it in a nutshell." He goes, "Yeah, he seems to be scared of things that are new or different. And he's like, doesn't know why he has it, but he just gets like really scared of doing new things. And it really stops him from doing a lot of things in life." And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Why would you do that?" And I was like, "Oh, darling, wow, okay. This is a great conversation." And I said, "Well, how do you experience life if there's new things?" He goes, "You just go with the flow." And I just look at his life and his perspective and how he's had extraordinary amounts of change and living in different countries and going on adventures where he's not known what's going to happen next, and how that's literally how his life is for him. And so, there's so many times where he goes, "What are we doing today?" And I'm like, "Just experience it." And he goes, "Okay." And I recognize that, not by design, but just by, you know, life, chop wood, carry water. Um, this is his experience, and I'm so happy and somewhat a little envious of this child of mine who experiences life like that as a very normal reality, and he doesn't have any desire to control any outcome, and he has no desire to feel he needs some sense of knowing to create the illusion of security or safety for him to step into the next moment. And, you know, his normal belief system is that life happens and you experience it, and you don't need to know what's happening next. And if you do, you do. And if you don't, you don't. You just go with the flow. And we did pinpoint a few times in his life where um, he had felt what he thought might have been anxiety. And we recognized that it was actually just overwhelm, and the difference between overwhelm and anxiety, and how overwhelms like a lot of emotions and feelings going on, and it doesn't necessarily paralyze you. And we talked about when I told him that we were moving to Australia, and he had he went into overwhelm because he was so sad to leave his friends and leave his school, but he was also incredibly excited about moving to Australia and living with his sister. And he was really confused because he had these two really big, quite polar emotions of intense sadness and intense excited at the same time. And he didn't know how to hold those emotions in the same place because he thought he could only be sad or happy, and not realize that by holding the duality of those emotions, he could feel it all and feel it all at the same time and be able to hold that energy and frequency. And when I explained to him that, that you can hold the emotions and feelings of overwhelming sadness and overflowing excitement at the same time, and it doesn't need to be either or. And when he realized that you can feel more than one emotion and feeling at the same time, that he was able to come out of that overwhelm and recognize that it's okay to feel incredibly sad and incredibly happy at the same time. And so we talked about, remember when you were really overwhelmed and you couldn't work out what to do and your brain was all mishmash about moving to Australia? And he goes, oh, yeah. I said, well, that's a really good example of overwhelm. And if someone was experiencing anxiety in the same scenario, they would just be in freak out zone because they couldn't recognize or self-regulate to realize that they can hold more than one emotion at any time. And that, you didn't have any need to know where you were specifically living or, details, because that's not part of your operating system. But, if someone needed very specific details so that they felt that they could prepare themselves for all of that. And he completely understood that. And he goes, oh, I remember when we moved into our house and I was in my new room and I was breathing really strangely because I felt really, I guess, overwhelmed about sleeping in a new room, which wasn't directly next door to your room like it used to be, and with a closed door because he used to have an open room that was like a kind of lounge room off my bedroom, which we'd converted into a bedroom for him. And so he was breathing really shallow and panting. He's like, oh, I feel really weird in my body because I got to sleep here in the first time. And he goes, so would you call that getting used to it? And I went, yeah, exactly. So when new things come along and we aren't used to it yet, we have this time where things can feel overwhelming. And he goes, yeah, I just had to get used to sleeping in my room. And I said, yeah. And then 2 days ago, we moved his room because a girl that was living with us moved out, and we moved Leo's room into her old room and made his bedroom into what he's calling his gaming room. He's actually got a big, beautiful sofa bed in there now and his gaming setup, but it's actually a guest room. And he goes, oh, I'm even further away from your bedroom now, and my window's really big and I can see out. I said, yeah, and you're right next door to Ruby now. He goes, yeah, well, I need to go through my getting used to it stage because I am feeling a little overwhelmed right now because I'm not used to this room and I'm not used to like that window and I said, yeah, exactly. And I said, think about it like a bridge. When we start new things, we need to kind of cross the bridge until we become used to it. So let's call it the bridge of becoming. And you just need to walk across the bridge until you're used to the new place, the new state, the new reality. He goes, okay, this is really good. And he goes, I just need to get used to it. And I said, see, we're just redirecting the energy from feeling overwhelmed and what could lead to anxiety to self-supporting and self-regulating, where you're like, I'm doing a new thing and I just need to get used to it. And I know I will get used to it because I've gotten used to many, many things my whole life. And one day it'll just feel normal. And then I would have become my normal room. So right now I'm on the bridge of becoming, where I get used to it. And then it'll become just regular normal. I said, yeah, because I can do that. I said, see how we redirected the energy that was feeling overwhelming into self-supporting. He goes, yeah, I'm going to talk to my friend about that. Maybe that'll help him with his anxiety. I said, that's a great idea. And he goes, if I can't explain it really great, do you think you could help me explain it to him? I said, I would love to do that. He said, okay, that's great. And so I thought that was a really cool thing to share on the podcast today, about so many people talking about their anxiety in the world, and how if we can really just look at it, it's because we think we need to know what's going to happen, and we make up all these scenarios, and our mind tells us all these stories, and even if they're positive, it's still maybe. And 99% of the time, life doesn't unfold in the way that our mind thinks it might. And it's just this form of suffering. And if we can learn to go with flow and self-regulate and self-support on the way, we're just walking across the bridge of becoming, getting used to the new thing, or the new experience, or the new room, or the new whatever. Because anxiety is just a mind identification go-to that really is such a waste of our time and energy. And we're going to use that energy anyway. So if we can redirect it, and this is something I've been doing for years, when I first became an energy master, realizing that you can redirect our energy. And one of my favorite conversions has been, I used to have this rebel energy in me where I wanted to rebel against everything, and I didn't like people trying to tell me how I should live my life, or that I should live in a box. And it was quite a disservice to myself, even though it was me breaking out of matrix conditioning. It wasn't very helpful in the whole scheme of things. And I redirected my rebel into discipline. And it was so profoundly epic, because the rebel is such a feisty thing. And I redirected that feisty energy into discipline. And it just was a supersonic evolutionary hack And so anytime we've got like energy that is experienced as suffering or debilitating or mind identification, we can redirect that into some form of self-regulating and self-support. And this is a really good example today. So, and that is my share, but that is what I wish to say. Thank you so much for listening. I am so grateful. Please feel free to share this episode with anyone that you may feel benefit. Also, if you want to subscribe to my podcast, you can do that and you'll get the new episodes popping up for you. I'm really grateful for all the messages and feedback I get. It's such an interesting conversation. I love it. My website is www.nickstar.com, Nikstar. Much love. Mwah.